Welcome to Creepy and Geeky, the double feature podcast of horror and more. I'm your host, Robert, and today we are talking about two Adam Wingard movies, You're Next and The Guest. Joining me for this is Kelly Gredner. Kelly is a vet tech by day and lover of movies by night. She enjoys horror, cult, and extreme cinema and co-hosts I Spit on Your podcast, where she and longtime friend Jessica discuss horror, cult, and subversive cinema. And Our Bloody Obsession, where she and the Queen of Extreme, Zoe, dissect the most disturbing movies ever made. Welcome to the show, Kelly.
Thank you for having me, especially on this incredible double feature. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I haven't really talked about these movies very much, even online. But I'm excited to talk about them today.
Excellent. Me too.
But first up, since you're new to the podcast, I want to get what was your first horror movie?
So I've been watching horror movies for probably about 100 years now. So I don't know what the very first one was, which is a really great question, but I can say that the very first experience watching The Exorcist as a tween was a very visceral experience and a very vivid memory of mine. So, I mean, I've watched a lot of horror movies, but that first time was quite memorable because it was a bunch of like 10-year-old girls huddled around at a sleepover, crying, no joke, watching The Exorcist for the first time because that movie, I mean, I still think it stands up even in 2023 as being quite unsettling. So in the early 90s, it just about killed all of us. So that was, I would say that was the first very memorable horror movie watching experience of mine.
So did that make you a fan of horror movies from that point on, or?
I mean, I hosted and went to a lot of epic slumber parties in the early 90s. We would go to the video store and rent like 5, 6, 7 horror movies and pull all-nighters. Remember those? Who can do that now? I mean, it's hard. We need a nap now, some coffee. Right. So early 90s, I was watching a lot of like 70s and 80s horror movies at these sleepovers. So I just remember that one being quite a vivid memory of mine that's lodged in my brain. So I was always a big fan, but I just remember that movie being super scary. And then once I got a little bit older, like 1996, 1997 was definitely a pinnacle moment in time in my horror fandom because I was older. And so 3 things happened at this point in time. Buffy the Vampire Slayer, the TV show, came out, which I became a massive fan of, still am. Scream came out in theaters, The Craft came out in theaters. And so what's important is that I was now old enough and there were all these really great horror movies coming out in theater. So now I was going to theater to see horror movies, whereas I was a bit too young and I wasn't able to go see it early 90s. So now things are changing. I'm going to the theater. Like I saw the Scream 1 and 2 and 3 in theater, The Craft, the Blair Witch Project in 1999. So that was like a big bunch of years for me because I was a horror fan and I was able to see all these movies in the theater. So that was a really exciting time for me. So I think that's really where things switched for me. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm a horror fan. I'm going to the theater and seeing these scary movies like in person in real time.
Yeah. And that was a really good time as well to get to be a horror fan. Like you said, all those movies coming out at once and, within that span, it was just, a new renaissance of horror.
It was exactly. And I was there for it. There was that little between 1990 to 1996, it was a little quiet. Like Candyman came out, but for whatever reason, I didn't see that in the theater. That is also a very vivid movie watching memory of mine being, that came out in 1994, I believe. And so again, I'm, a teenager and that scared the crap out of me and my friend. And so that was a great movie. I think I saw Silence of the Lambs in theaters, but maybe not. Might have been a video rental because again, that's 92 and I was pretty young. So probably didn't see that in theater. But it was so it was kind of a quieter time and then boom, bam, was great.
Yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, that leads us right into our topic of discussion today. We are, like I said before, talking about Adam Wingard's early movies, You're Next and The Guest. And we're going to start with You're Next. So, when did you first see this, and how did you see it?
Oh my goodness. So before we even get into this, I'm so excited about these movies because I am a massive Simon Barrett fan, like
Okay.
massive, but I
All right.
also love Adam Wingard. Like this is a dream team. Um, I enjoy like everything they do together. Like I watched their first movie together was A Horrible Way to Die in 2010, which is fantastic. Less horror, more like thriller, but dark, kind of gritty, emotional. It's really great. And then, of course, Your Next is 2011. And then they worked on the VHS anthology series together. But like when they come together, wonderful things happen, especially these two movies. These are probably my two favorites that they've done together. And so big fan, Simon Barrett, Adam Wingard here. So this was like an excellent double feature, excellent pairing. So that's what I'll say first off. So when I saw you posting about these two movies, I was like, yes, me. Also, talking about The Guest is what I do pretty much on a day-to-day basis with anybody that will listen. So, so You're Next. I might have seen this in theaters. Again, it's COVID pandemic time has lapsed my memory, but
Right.
I either saw this in theaters or I might be mistaking that with The Strangers. It's fine. But I was intrigued by it. So I'm sorry. It's either theaters or rental at home kind of watching it, but I
Right.
liked it a lot. Home invasion films I do enjoy, and this one I think is quite special and unique. And again, I think it's the dream team aspect of it, but predominantly Simon Barrett. I just really like the movies and characters that he writes because he's got a style. Once you watch enough of his movies, you see it. You see it.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I've seen enough of his movies. I mean, I've seen pretty much most of the stuff that they've done together.
Yeah.
The their later work because they've been working on uh, Godzilla versus Kong and the new one that's about to come out as well. So
Yeah, I'm so
uh,
proud of him. Not that I
yeah,
haven't watched them yet, so maybe I can't
oh yeah,
say so much for Adam Wingard, but I haven't watched them yet. I'd like to because I again don't know him, but proud of him for getting the opportunities to direct such big movies.
yeah. No,
Cool.
Godzilla versus Kong is really good. It's definitely it's tied for my favorite of the American Godzillas. So
Ooh,
it's yeah,
nice.
yeah.
Cool.
So it's I'm excited to see the new one.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see how that goes. But
Yeah.
yeah, going back to Your Next. Yeah, I only saw this for the first time a few years ago. I believe this rewatch that I just did was only my second or third time watching it.
Mm-hmm.
So I got introduced to it through, I believe, through Cavity Colors, because they were
Mm.
doing a t-shirt and stuff on the movie, and
Nice.
so I was like, okay, let me check it out. And plus, it was right around that same time like they were doing that I was hearing a lot of people talking about it.
Yeah.
And this would have been 2018ish or so, so it would have
Mm-hmm.
been a few years after it had come out, but people were talking about it and uh,
Mm-hmm.
in glowing terms. And I'll tell you, the first time I watched it, I was just kind of soft on it.
Mm.
I
Mm-hmm.
liked it, but I didn't love it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and on the subsequent watches, I've come to enjoy it even more each time. And I enjoy the kind of like black comedy of it.
Mm.
Uh, so it's because see my like as my listeners will know that I love horror comedies,
Mm-hmm.
but this one isn't like in your face funny. It's more like I said, a dark comedy in a lot of ways where it's just the comedy is definitely intentionally there, but it's not as in your face. So, but I do like it.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, the comedy is there, and honest. And again, if you've seen enough Simon Barrett movies, he's cheeky. He's a cheeky motherfucker. He likes to throw that in. He likes to throw a bit of that humor in.
Right.
Um, and so no, I agree. I agree. It is kind of cheeky. There's cheeky moments. You wouldn't, expect it through all the brutality. This movie is
Yes.
brutal, and
No,
sometimes
it's
I
very
forget
brutal.
about that. Um, a lot of the kills are pretty intense. And again, when I rewatched it the other day for this show, I was wonderfully reminded of how bloody and brutal everything is. Surprisingly so. Like, I think it's sometimes easy to forget that this home invasion movie is pretty visceral and pretty dark. And it's really great. I mean, I have a good time with it.
Yeah. No, it's a like, that's it's it's funny just how brutal it is. And I think that's why that I have seen people mention it in terms of that, and that's a good thing, which it is. And see, I'm not a fan of home invasion horror, but I don't seek it out
Mm-hmm.
more so because I guess that it's more realistic in real life situations. It's something that could happen to people, and so it's one of those things where it's just like, I mean, I'll watch it when I come to it, and if there's something good about it, and like I hear good things about a movie, and so, but this one was definitely one of those ones, and I think that ultimately what really makes this movie is Sharni Vinson's character, and just being this really badass final girl, which is you know we've got plenty of final girls out there in the world of horror movies, but you don't get somebody who's so prepared and so ready for this kind of situation that she basically is so on the offensive that these killers have no clue what's going on. So
Yes, yes. Thank you for bringing her up. Erin is definitely the reason why this movie stands out amongst other home invasion movies. Because I mean, I get it. I don't often super seek them out either because the setup is fairly formulaic.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
that's like every subgenre. So I get it. So it can either go the way of, oh, we're invading this home and whoops, oh, we underestimated this person who we're invading their home of, and now they're killing us, or vice versa, they're killing the people that they're invading. So it's not, oh, you kind of have to get some, I don't want to say gimmicks, but like something a little different to pique someone's interest about it. And I think she is what makes it so interesting. And I wrote about her and some more current final girls in a piece I wrote for Horror Homeroom on contemporary slashers, and she is quite incredible. And again, Simon Barrett, if you watch enough, he does like interesting, layered, kick-ass women. I'll just do a little shout out to his movie that he wrote and directed, which is Seance, that came out a couple of years
okay,
ago. Recommend it. I will say that I feel like the first 2/3 are a little bit quiet, which was hard for me to watch because I don't like his stuff is not very quiet, let's say, but it's
right.
a little bit more standard fare, like, oh, this is a haunted girls' school. But then the last third is where I'm like, oh, yeah, this is a Simon Barrett movie, and this is what makes everything worthwhile. So I'm not going to give away the ending, but definitely watch it. But when you see it, you're like, yes, this is what I'm here for when I watch a Simon Barrett movie. And so here we have as Erin, she is super unique in that you're right. She's immediately on the offensive. So many of our final girls over the years, God bless them, are not always the most interesting. They usually just like
Yes.
fight for the night. It's like this reactive, but she's proactive, but that's how she's been
Yeah.
raised. And I love the subversiveness of this movie because even her boyfriend at the time, and then at the end of the movie, he's like, if you would have just acted normal, oh, normal? You mean like a submissive, scared woman who isn't going to fight for her life? If you would
Right.
have just acted normally, Erin, this would have been fine. but no, but she just like everybody underestimated her. And I love that about it, because she just kicks it into high gear. You know, she's making booby traps. She's tending to wounds. She's not afraid. She's like, okay, just she's, as the family is falling apart and getting into their still family quibbles and drama that they're all caught up still in. She's like, no, okay, go lock all the doors, block the windows. Like, she's already into survival mode and everybody's just falling apart. And like, you need that person. And I love that it was her.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's, and I think that's interesting though too, that you do see her let the fear in. It's one of those interesting things where instead of being like, she becomes Sarah Connor and just like, in Terminator 2 where she's just like, badass and everything, she's letting that fear in for a minute. She's feeling it and then goes, okay, I now I need to, put it past and let's get going.
Yeah.
And so that's what's great. And, she's definitely one of those characters that you love to watch because of that, because she's human, she's real, and you can see totally somebody who would have lived in that kind of environment, having those skills necessary to, survive something like this.
She shows vulnerability. You're right. Exactly. Which makes her so relatable. Sarah Connor, God, I love her. But not the most relatable,
And I think Sarah Connor does. I think Sarah Connor does show relatability and show emotions at times and everything. But it's but in this instance, it's just you don't want somebody who's going to go badass, like full bore badass. That like I think you have to have that relatability, that emotional like vulnerability, to portray her, portray a character like this in a realistic way. I think that's both a combination of the writing and Sharni Vincent's performance.
Agreed. This movie is a really great creation of like tension, really well written characters, like every single person in it. The family dynamic is really fantastic. They also Wingard and Barrett really like to reuse some actors, so there's some familiar faces once you see a few of the movies, so that's really great to see. And this was I forgot until I rewatched it, but it was Barbara Crampton's revival, her movie back into horror, and I was so sad to see her die. But she was back, and that was really great. So it just felt very fresh.
Yeah.
And in 2011, we needed fresh.
yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And Barbara Crampton being back into horror and then doing this, and the other movie she did at the time, We Are All Still Here, really kind of brought her back big time. She was like, she got both of these movies, and she was just like, you know what? I really love doing horror. I'm coming back. And now she's back in such a huge way. She's like not only acting, but she's now producing movies, and she's like a real champion for horror in general. And I love to see that. I've talked recently to people. I just finished up my Halloween series, and we were talking about Jamie Lee Curtis. And as much as Jamie Lee Curtis, she does a great job at playing Laurie Strode, she's not a horror person. She outside of these outside of the Halloween movies now, she doesn't do horror. She doesn't watch horror. She doesn't live that world. And so it's great to see somebody like Barbara Crampton, Felissa Rose, all these people who have been in these movies and still love them and still champion them and still work on them. And, that kind of like, it gives that kind of credibility more so for that genre than somebody like Jamie Lee Curtis, who's great. Again, don't get me wrong, I love her, but she just doesn't care about horror, and that's fine. But you love it when you see somebody like Barbara Crampton doing that and just moving the genre forward. So
totally. And Nev Campbell is kind of like that too, right? She doesn't do horror.
No, she doesn't.
But she does scream, and she's always championed Wes Craven's creation and Scream and Sydney as a character. And I mean, that's the best we can hope for. Like, have respect, reverence for a genre that has loved you so much. Maybe you don't love the genre per se so much, but I like when people aren't ashamed to be in horror movies, or that they have been in horror movies. So many people started in horror movies, actors, directors, any like filmmakers. It's okay. It's okay to say that, because horror is fun and fantastic, but I like when they champion it and like get full-fledged into it. Felissa Rose is at the Shockstock, the convention I was at last weekend, and she's just like a Shockstock mainstay, like legend. Like, she's another one of those that she's done a bunch of horror roles for sure, but she does have that iconic one that she did in the 80s, 100 years ago, but she still champions Sleepaway Camp to this day and horror fans. And again, I just really respect that.
Yeah, same. Yeah, anybody who like, and I get it. Like, if you did horror and horror, like, and I know some people do horror and that's not what they want to do with their career. They only do horror so they can get in and get a foot in and then move on to what they really want to do. I get that. You don't care about it, whatever. But like, I really, really appreciate the filmmakers and the actors and actresses who really love the genre, continue to be part of it, even if they go off and do something like, more mainstream and more high profile, but they keep coming back. That's the kind of love I have. Like, for that, like that's the Bruce Campbells and those people who really champion that genre filmmaking in all ways. That's the reason why I have this podcast, is for that love of the genre and everything. So it's really great to see people like that really champion it. And and even with Adam Wingard, I mean, he's kept his foothold in that. He might be doing the Godzilla movies now, but Godzilla is arguably has one foot in the horror genre. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, it's this movie's a lot of fun. There's a lot of crazy kills. It's like you said, he uses a lot of a lot of similar actors throughout some of his movies. It's interesting that he used a lot of he came from this the mumblecore or mumblegore kind of group of filmmakers, and that so he uses a few of those same filmmakers in the movie, which is always interesting that you've got these directors who were coming up at that time who also were doing double duty as actors. So Ty West, who everybody knows nowadays for doing X and Pearl, he's in the movie as an actor. He's he has a very short role in this movie, but it's interesting to see him and others that have done other movies as well as directors and writers or whatever. Simon Barrett, he plays one of the killers in this, so it's again short-lived. But it's fun and interesting to see that aspect of it, and it's very scrappy, DIY, and sure, this is obviously a low budget movie, and it doesn't need to be high budget, but and again, horror is great for that. You don't have to do a lot of stuff, but it's fun to see this movie in those terms, and see like just that not low budget, but just that kind of camaraderie, that group of people coming together to help each other make that kind of movie, and really speaks to a lot of that again, what makes horror kind of nice at times is people coming together to make something cool.
Yeah, the community aspect of it. I love that you called it like a DIY kind of project. And you're right, it is. And Ty West, I'd throw into this kind of like group of dudes, filmmakers that I think are just super, super fantastic. And they do have a lot to say. They make some really great movies. And, Ty West was also in the VHS anthology series. It's like a bunch of people that kind of like, not really started, but kind of started in that early 2010s and VHS. And I love that. I love the camaraderie. I love that these two guys work together regularly, because again, it's quite magical they really just they work very, very well together. I think they really understand each other. You watch interviews, like they just seem like the best of friends. They can just read each other so well. They know what they both want. And so like Adam Wingard directing something written by Simon Barrett, I just think they just really can read each other so well and knows what each other wants and needs. Because there's some really great like jump scares, but really like spooky moments. When again they put Barbara Crampton to bed, and she's laying there and she's crying, and then it's very still, and then that hand kind of just comes out from underneath the bed. I was like, oh boy. It's good. Like even somebody that's been watching horror movies for so many years, like stuff like that can still get me. It's still unexpected. Like you kind of knew that there was somebody in the house, but it wasn't super obvious yet.
Right.
And so there they are, because we all have that. Come on. We all have a fear of somebody being underneath the bed or something getting our feet, or like we can't, like even as adults, like that kind of childhood fear, it remains, that anxiety remains. So it just hits on a variety of certain kind of fears, I think, in this that I think hits very well. And that was just like a really incredible scene.
Oh yeah, no, there's plenty of that going on in here. Like they find that closet where like somebody's been like hiding in there for like who knows how long. And it's a lot of that where you're just like, oh no, I don't want to find something like that in my house. Like that's creepy as all.
Yeah. Ooh, the Froggers. Yes.
Yeah. No, and then like, and the opening, let's go back to the beginning, that opening scene with Larry Fessenden.
Yeah.
And it's and again, talking about bringing in these, actors and and directors and stuff. Larry Fessenden, legend in the low budget horror world. So it's he had seen him pop up in this. It was great. It's very short, small role, but great seeing him in this as well, and just fun to and to keep coming back to that. Also, keep coming back to that house and just making it creepy every time. It's just every bit of this is just fun.
Yeah, so I was gonna say it gets into the action right away, which is also something I forget. I appreciate a decent like 90-ish minute runtime. I don't have a lot of time and energy and attention span for anything 2 hours and above. So I appreciate and respect that this has a really good runtime, but they also get into the conflict and action right away, like so quickly. I mean, we do have that like cold open type thing that happens, but we get set up and we now, okay, all the family's together, boom, the big family dinner, that's when shit goes awry. And I'm ready for it. And then the rest of the movie is just tension. We had already created like the family tension and the drama. And we're like, oh boy. But then we get into like the conflict tension. And I think they did all of that very, very well. And it keeps you engaged, keeps you compelled and enthralled throughout the whole movie, because we're unraveling this mystery, which I like that too, little clues here and there. So it was just incredibly cleverly written, great acting, little cheeky humor, especially at the end. The ends of these movies. And again, watch Seance. But yeah, the cheeky ending. I'm here for it. And I forget that again. I'm like, yes, Erin survives. Absolutely. I know this. We all know this. But then I forget there's a moment where I'm like, wait, does she? Because she gets shot, right? I'm like, oh no. I forget that she gets shot. I'm like, wait, does she not survive? Is it one of those endings? It's not. But for a brief moment, they still get me. They get me.
No, and that's what's great about it too, is that you get that crazy, like, like when you see it for the first time, that if you go into it and you're just like, oh, she survived all this only to get shot by this cop. And you understand it too. Again. You get it. You totally understand. Like if the cop walks into that, like of course he sees just her stabbing somebody. Of course he's gonna shoot her and take her down. But it's like, you get that moment. You're just like, oh man, come on. And then, she moves and everything's okay. But then you get that
But
last
then,
little stinger bit. Like that's just so great,
oh,
'cause-
we forgot about the booby trap. Whoops.
yeah. Yeah, because you do forget about it. You're like, okay, yeah,
Yep.
everything's been going on, everything's been, oh
Yep.
no, so
Yeah. Yeah. And you're like, oh, then it ends. You're like, oh, cheeky.
yeah, which is great. It's a
Yeah.
perfect ending like that.
Yep.
Everything gets kind of tied up in a neat little bow of sorts.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's funny too because I've seen people mention, kind of in regards to the movie Ready or Not, more than anything else that I've seen recently about like what happens to this character, like the main character, after everything's over.
Mhm.
Because when it comes down to it, now, whatever cops come at this last minute, she's gonna still be alive. This
Yeah.
cop's dead, everybody else is dead in there. Like
Yeah.
it's all fingers are gonna point to her.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's gonna
It's
be bad.
true. It's
So it's like you don't want to think about this at the end of things. So
no, it's going to be fine. They're going to believe her. There's some evidence around. You're right. It is some absolute carnage, though. Like there is,
absolutely.
literally, she leaves no one alive. So
yeah.
it's incredible.
So what would you say was your favorite kill or your favorite scene? Do you have one?
Okay, the blender again. I
I think the
always
blender
forget.
is most people's favorite.
Oh, well, again always forget about it. How brutal some of this is. I remember like it's action packed and it's well paced and Aaron, yay, but then the blender, and I was just like, well, it does think that it's closed, so it would actually run. Wow. But she's so resourceful. And I love that. It reminds me of Buffy. Like, you're just going to take whatever is around you to kill the people that are harming you. And I love that so much. And she like throws the oil. He's like, it's not even hot anymore. But then he slips. Cheeky.
Yeah.
Oh, the blender though. Ooh, it's just, it's, you can feel that one. You can feel it. The kind of funny, but then not funny when the sister runs full speed into the piano wire.
Yeah.
Oh, that's clever. It's clever.
And I'm glad they didn't go for the really like what would have normally been a horror trope of her going full force into it and her whole head coming off. Because that definitely wouldn't happen in real life. So I love that they actually went for the realism in that and just had her cut her throat open. So I was just like, all right, that's cool.
Yeah, it's such a great epic lead up. And you're like, oh no. Yeah. It's fantastic. It's so good. So good.
Definitely.
How about you? Do you have a favorite kill? That's not the blender, maybe.
I think probably the blender, yeah, because I think the blender is the most creative kill. Like everything else, I mean, I do like the booby trap scene where she puts the nails in the boards and she tricks him into thinking that it's only the one and he comes down on the other one. That part's really good. And I actually kind of enjoy now knowing that it's Simon Barrett, but like her just bludgeoning the dude to death.
With like the meat tenderizer. Yikes. Yeah. Like that is a heavy mallet. Like that is that would cave in his skull. Absolutely.
Oh yeah. And she's just like, she's getting out all that emotion and all that, like, just that that anger and everything, and just goes to town. So
yeah, for sure. And I love like the brother and his girlfriend's faces. They're like, oh. So they watch her like, bludgeon a man's skull to death, like just bludgeon it in. They're like, whoa, our plan might not go as well planned. Right. We did not expect her. And this, love it.
Exactly. All right. If you don't have anything else to say, I think I'm good on this one. We can move on to the guest.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
So the guest is actually my favorite of these. And it's funny too, because I believe that this is only the second time I've watched it for this episode.
Mm.
So but immediately the first time I watched that, I became a fan.
Hmm.
The between the color palette, I'm a big synthwave music fan, so
Me
that like the
too.
use of synthwave through all of this, the kind of underlying like what is going on with this dude the whole time, like
Hmm.
you're just wondering what's going on. And it's just a fun movie that's like this weird hybrid of action movie, like 80s action movie, and like a horror movie.
Hmm.
And so it's just like this perfect blend, because like for the most part, like you're getting like this actiony kind of movie going on through most of it, and then towards the end is where it gets into more like the slasher territory. um and it's just great. um so when did you
Yeah.
first see
Uh,
this?
okay. So I don't remember the first time that I actually ended up seeing The Guest. It probably was around the time that it came out. All
Okay.
I know is that this is a perfect movie. I have no notes. Well, I have lots of notes, but like no notes. I have seen this movie a lot. It My obsession with this movie and love for this movie, 5 stars, 5 out of 5, has just grown. Like, this is one of my all-time favorite movies. I watch it at least once every few months. Like, it is watched often. I was supposed to talk about The Guest on a different podcast maybe last month, but it ended up falling through. And I was like, do I really need to watch The Guest again? Like, I know this movie inside and out. I've watched it so many times in like 6 years.
But you still watched it again, didn't you?
Of course. I was like, I don't actually need to watch this again, but I'm going to. So yesterday I just like popped it on. I was like, yes, yes, yes. Because I love this movie. And like, listen, the premise isn't all that revolutionary. It's actually
No.
kind of cliche. However, it's taken that kind of cliche basic premise but turned it into like this pop culture phenomenon. Okay, Dan
Yeah.
Stevens, prior to this movie, did mainly TV and Downton Abbey. Okay.
Yeah.
And now we love Dan Stevens. Micah Monroe, the
Yeah.
same thing. The same year this came out, It Follows came out, and she's blown up.
Right.
Like prior to that,
Yeah.
she had done a few movies, but holy moly. Like, and this movie is a Halloween movie as well, if folks don't
Yes.
remember, because sometimes it's easy to forget because of the abs of it all. But it's a perfect movie. It just is this wonderful, perfect storm of action, sexual tension, the synth score, but also the soundtrack, the like kind of
Yeah.
gothy new wave, industrial kind of songs that they chose throughout this movie is so perfect. It's so cool. Again, they made this like very cliche premise that like, who cares? Super soldier secret projects, whatever. Look at this movie and like live this movie. It's a perfect movie. I love it. I love it so much. I'll stop there for now because you're allowed to talk too. But like I've seen it 1,000 times.
That's so
It's just
funny. Yeah.
incredible.
No, it's the funny thing is that like I enjoy the movie a lot, and I don't disagree with anything you've said. That I think that it's one of those movies that I kind of forget sometimes.
Yeah.
That exists and is so good. And it's
Yeah.
one of those ones that I kind of want to savor each time. And so
Yeah.
like I said,
Yeah.
it's only been twice that I've watched it.
Yeah.
But so like I don't like I'm the kind of person who will watch and rewatch movies over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And watch them to death, and then
Mm-hmm.
we'll be like, okay, well, I still enjoy the movie, but it's not as good as it used to be
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah.
And so I like to give a little bit of time between movies just so I can savor them again,
I get
especially
it.
movies I really enjoy.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one is just, yeah, like you said, it's just fun. Dan Stevens, like this was like
Oh,
his first really big thing, and not even
yeah.
big. This was not huge for him,
No.
but it was his first like role kind of after Downton Abbey. He wanted to do
Mm-hmm.
something different. He wanted to get away from the heartthrob guy, and he did it with this. He bulked up. He was like really thin. I guess apparently
Mm-hmm.
before
Mm-hmm.
they started filming, and actually, they've he has this scene. You mentioned it, the abs. He they so
The
this
abs of it
shirtless
all.
scene. Yeah. So he has this shirtless scene where he's got to look all nice and buff and everything like that. But that was like literally the last scene they filmed, because they wanted to make sure he was at his like buffest, and
Mm-hmm.
so they filmed everything
Right.
else in the movie up until that point. So his kind of his weight and his muscularness kind of like fluctuate until that point. Uh,
Right.
and so
Well,
like
it was worth the
sometimes
wait.
he's skinnier in scenes like even
Yeah.
later in the movie than he is at that point. And
Right.
so it's kind of funny. I didn't really notice it. It was something I found out later on. So but it was interesting. But yeah, like I kind of like the super soldier thing. I'm one of those ones that kind of wants more explanation for like what the project was and everything. And I get
Fair.
why they didn't, to leave
Fair.
it kind of ambiguous, but I just kind of want to know more.
Right.
But because I'm an action fan, I like the MCU
Mm-hmm.
stuff and just
Yeah.
action movies in general. So I like
Yeah.
that aspect of it. That was fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, Michael Monroe, like you said, coming off around the same time as It Follows, which was
Mm-hmm.
huge for her. But again,
Yep.
like it's so funny too. Like we say huge, like they're huge in the horror world. Outside of the
Yeah.
horror world,
Yeah.
nobody knows these movies at all.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is so weird.
Yeah.
So it's it's so funny too because like I'll get obsessed with stuff. I used to be really into Funko Pops.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was collecting those for a few years, and I thought Funko Pops were huge out in the mainstream world. Nobody gives a shit about Funko Pops. Like they do, like people collect them, but people are casual collectors that collect them
Yeah.
here, and but it's so funny, like getting out of that world. I never see them anymore. Like I very
Right.
rarely will see anybody posting about them
Mm.
or even seeing them advertised anywhere, but they're still big. The company's still around and still making them. So it's so funny. But that's the same thing with horror movies. Like, sure, there's horror movies that will hit the mainstream and be big. But a lot of these other ones that we think of that get talked a lot about, like, It Follows, um, you don't
Mm-hmm.
hear about them until you kind of immerse yourself in that world.
Yeah, it's
Um,
true.
so it's interesting.
It's
And then
true.
it's the same thing with The Guest. The Guest was one of those movies that I didn't know about until I kind of got into this world.
Right.
And and I'm glad I did, because it's such a fun, good movie. And it's like there's never a dull moment in this movie. It's
No. Nope.
it's just fun. And speaking of actors that are in this, Lance Reddick's in this. And I'm a
Mm-hmm.
huge fan of his. And it's so sad that he just died.
Mm-hmm.
But he's got such a great role in this.
Yep.
And he, it's sad that they didn't kind of continue the story on. Not for him, but I'm like in general, like they leave it on a cliffhanger note that they could have done a
Yep.
guest too. And
Mm-hmm.
I think they wanted to do it, they just haven't done it, especially since Adam Wingard's gone on to do
Yep.
bigger things now.
Yep.
So but yeah, it's just, yeah, this movie is so crazy good. um just
It it holds no punches, right? It just
yeah,
every scene has something excellent in it that you need to be watching for. The characters are so good, like that whole family. And the messed up thing is, and it's because David goes there for very good, wholesome reasons, and
yeah,
he does help the family out in very
oh
demented
yeah,
ways, very backwards ways, but he helps that family out. But I love the dynamic between David and the son Luke. Also, Luke
yeah,
gives that actor gives very good face. Like his reactions to things that David
yeah.
said. Like there's the writing in this, I think, is just so incredibly. It's excellent. It's incredible. All the characters, the dialogue, the cheekiness. But yeah, that dynamic between David and Luke is so good. And I enjoy it so much. There's so much humor in this, like, and it's easy to
Hmm.
like
Yeah,
forget that there is a lot of humor in it. Um, there's so much detail put into everything that David says and how he acts and what he does. And when David says to Luke, he's like, cash is easy to get. And Luke's like, what?
Yeah.
Like, who is this person? And like, what is happening? But like, he looks up to him so much as like this surrogate brother figure, which is really sad. And he thinks that they're friends. Like, as cheeky and dark and action-packed this movie is, there's so much heart in it that it's just like it hits you on so many different levels. That wonderful bit of dialogue with Luke and David, where he's like, you know what? Don't get beat up at school. He's like, if they beat you up, go to their house and burn it down with everyone inside. What's the worst they can do? And he's like, what?
Yeah. It's just like, that's a huge red flag, dude. Run.
But it's like so normal for David to say that, but it's not a normal thing to say. I love it. I'm obviously one of those people that will watch things to absolute death. As I said, I watch this like every few months. I think it's also a portion of, besides being one of my favorite movies of all time, it's a comfort movie. I get so much joy out of this movie. I put it on and it starts and I'm like, yes, we're here. I want to live in this world. I mean,
this
Dan
could
Stevens,
easily become a comfort movie for me.
Yeah, right. It's so wonderful, but it has that heart. It has the action. It has the music. It just like hits you on so many different levels. And that's really hard, I think, for a movie to do. And this one does it so well. Micah Monroe's like her like small town goth outfits, like the attention paid to like costume design. Like, what? I love it. She is just like an icon, a fashion icon in this movie. And maybe that is a lesser opinion. Like, not a lot of people have that opinion, but like, I'm sorry. Like, her outfits are incredible.
No, I agree. It's so funny too. No, I agree. I think it's funny too, because like her and her best friend are like these waitresses at this like, like a small town diner. They're still like, they're still like, they've got their like knee-high socks on. Both of them do that. Like, they're both wearing these like, these gothy, kind of, still keeping some personality to them.
Yes.
And they're obviously still, good workers and, and so it's just one of those things where it's just, it's so bizarre. This movie's so weird and fun, and like you said about how David interacts with the family. Like, each member of the family he sits down with and interacts with them and becomes like a confidant to them all, and he and like you said, he helps them in all these different ways that helps them come together, and until he
has to kill them.
Until he has to kill them, because they find out who, like, what he is or who he is or whatever. And so he's just gonna take them all out, and so it's just like, holy crap, that's some bad programming. So it's just, it's so fun, and you think that sure, the guy's off, and you're like, oh, something's wrong with this guy, but he's being real good with the family until like Michael Monroe's character figures out something's not right with this guy, and starts this chain of events that leads to the end,
the death of just, like, her whole town.
Right. Like, he's it's like, totally, it's so funny too, because like it becomes the Terminator at the end, and this guy just coming out, and it's kind of funny too, because it kind of mirrors that, because Sarah Connor was this waitress and everything, so it's kind of funny to have that aspect of it, kind of this Terminator versus this waitress aspect. So it's just fun. It's like you said, there's humor throughout this that's just, it's well timed. Every actor in this movie is doing such a great job, that between the writing and the acting, it's just everybody's spot on.
I have to say, like, Dan Stevens, I try to watch anything Dan Stevens has ever been in. He is a busy man. You go to his IMDb, he has not stopped working. Like, he is busy. He unfortunately doesn't come to horror. He doesn't do genre a lot. Like he did do The Rental and Apostle. I mean, I really like Apostle. I like it as a really.
I haven't seen it yet, but yeah, it's on my list.
Really fantastic, interesting folk horror. So he's still very handsome, and he's just a beautiful man. Like we can't escape that. It's like amped up. I feel like they even added like maybe like color to his eyes in this, but his baby blues are very piercing. But he is a really fantastic actor. Like he definitely has range, and you see it even in this movie. And like I was really paying attention to. I mean, I pay attention to him a lot, but I was extra paying attention to him when I watched it the other day for this. But like he goes from that really sweet, like boy next door kind of, oh gosh golly do, oh I'm just here to help you, your brother really loved you, to don't fuck with me, but like in an instant, because he knows once Anna, that's a feminine instinct here, she knows something's not right. That's what we do. We know when things are not safe. So she starts that, and when she has already started the investigation, she's in her room and he comes in, he's like, I'm really sorry about Craig, and he's got that, oh gosh golly, I'm so sorry. Then it's like, I'll be gone in a few days. Okay. And it's just like he flips that switch. Ooh.
Yeah.
Like he's incredible, but he has so much personality as well. Like again, you would think that this kind of robotic super soldier is not going to have personality, but he does. So when he goes into that bar looking for Anna, and he also sadly knows that the friend knows what's going on, but he just seems very annoyed. He's like, I'm exasperated and I'm annoyed and I have to go kill this whole town. Like it's a lot of work. But that whole diner scene when he comes in, that's that really great song playing. He's like, here are your grenades. Like it's excellent. It's so excellent. He does such a fantastic job in this. And I think his performance is just not talked about enough, really. Like he does such a fantastic job in this, abs and all.
I think it's interesting. Yeah, I think it's interesting that his star isn't bigger. Like, he's had some minor hits. Like, obviously he was very popular on Downton Abbey. He got rave reviews for Beauty and the Beast. And but like he just kind of does smaller stuff. Which I think is, he likes kind of just being that actor rather than going for the the high profile stuff. He's just like, I'm gonna go for the interesting stuff. He was on the 3 seasons that he did of Legion, which I still haven't seen, but I've heard really good things about. But it's so he's one of those actors, and it's like with Michael Monroe too. She's she does genre. She's pretty much a genre actress. But her star even in the genre world is kind of low. So it's interesting to see these actors in this and having a great time, and I agree with you. He does such a good job at all the emotions and this switching back and forth between them all. Like he's got this, even from the beginning, he's got this sly like smirk going on the whole time, where it's this, you're supposed to take this as a smile of just like niceness, but you can even tell that there's this something going on underneath. It's not just, it's not quite that nice of a smile. And so maybe that's just because I know what happens in the end, and maybe I'm just reading into it, but I feel like it's not just a nice smile the whole time. So
I agree.
There's definitely something more devious going on the whole time.
And then we get to the ending, which I love the ending. It looks great. Also, what small town high school has enough money to make your Halloween dance this epic?
They have one of the best haunted houses ever in the like that I've ever seen done in a movie. Like that is just every section, like because they commit to doing like each section is just different. And I'm like, okay, this is how it should be done everywhere. Like I've not seen a haunted house this good ever. So like the production designers on this were so good. And how big is their freaking gym that they can do all that?
I know, right? It's kind of wild, but that's such a beautiful ending. Again, the music is perfect. He puts on the mixed CD she made for him, and the fog and the colors and the beautiful homage to Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Like, this is a Halloween movie. Again, we can't forget this is set in fall. This is a Halloween movie. But it's such an incredible ending. I mean, you have Anna and Luke coming together to kill David, quote, kill. And then it's like the what the fuck ending. It's so, and it just ends again.
I love that ending.
Ugh,
it's
cheeky.
so good. It's so good. It's
man.
like, you're just like, because you literally you see him coming out, and you as the audience member, you're like, that dude, that's him. Like, how did he survive? And and then that's what she does too. She finally sees him and she's like, what the fuck? And then it just fucking ends.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's just so it's such a great ending. And you're just like, I want another one. Please give me another one.
Yes,
so
I know. Yeah. And I know the April Fool's joke of this year. What was that this year? Was it last year?
I think it was last year.
Oh my goodness, my life. But last year we're like
soundtrack.
We're like, wait a minute. I mean, that's a great soundtrack. I mean, they did great.
Such a
I was like,
soundtrack.
I'll take that. That's fine too.
Yeah. Right. I was like, but just like, I don't even care. Like, give me a story at least. You don't even have to make a movie. Just give me the story. Like, just let me read the story about what this second movie would have been, So
yeah. He's cheeky. He would figure something out. It's so it's just overall, again, I think perfect storm of really, really excellent writing, directing. And I think really this is my favorite movie that they've done together. My favorite Simon Barrett.
I'd say so far mine too.
Yeah. It hits all the boxes for me. I mean, I probably live in this very small bubble because like anyone that I've shown this to becomes obsessed with it. And like on Twitter, there's been a lot of late night like Twitter threads of us just people like we're just going off about the guests and throwing out so many gifs, especially the coming out of the shower gif. Like it's just turned into this wonderful community of like this cult classic that again, I think maybe outside of horror, like people don't know about it. Like, I don't know. I'm so entrenched that I don't really know what happens outside of horror and stuff like that. But horror fans love this movie. We love The Guest. I mean, I've seen a lot of like, maybe one or two people reference it. It's like very John Carpenter-esque, which I find really interesting, which I kind of get. It's like this stranger coming into this, this small town, not who you think it is. And then there's this explosion of action and very cool score. Halloween, Assault on Precinct 13, maybe a little bit of Prince of Darkness. I mean, I could see it. But you know what? Horror fans love The Guest, and I'm here for it because I think, again, it's a perfect movie. Like, again, no notes. I'm sitting there, I'm like, no notes. Like, there's like, it's just, again, it checks off boxes for me.
Yeah. I agree fully. I think it's one of those movies that I'm glad that I got the chance to see eventually. Like it popped up on my radar, and I was just like, okay, yes, I'm definitely going to watch this now. It seems like right up my alley. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, yes, this is totally my thing. I bought I bought a hoodie from Cavity Colors when they put it out.
God.
They
I
put
know,
out a
right?
really cool one. So, and actually it's funny too, the artwork that was used for their I think it was their second run of stuff that they did for The Guest. It's actually by an artist named Aaron Leah. So the artwork that he did is now for Cavity Colors is now used for the Blu-ray and on digital platforms. So
cool.
Yeah, so it's really cool. Like I love seeing that artwork being used for that. So very, very cool. I actually want to get the second sight limited edition 4K version because that one comes with like a book and cards and everything, and it just looks so good. It's kind of pricey for me right now. So.
Yes, I know. I'm with you. I'm with that. I want everything. The Guest. I have my basic Blu-ray, and I was like, I've seen this movie 1,000 times. Why haven't I watched it with commentary yet? I thought about it after I finished watching it.
Yeah.
I was like, wait a minute. I should have just watched it with the commentary next time I watch it, which could be next week. Who knows?
Maybe tonight. No.
Maybe. Love it. Don't tire of it.
All right. Well, if we don't have anything else to say about either one of these two movies, why don't you go ahead and let people know where they can find you online?
I will, but first off, thank you so much for having me. Finally get to talk about The Guest. I'm surprised it's taken this long, but it's fantastic. And folks, watch Seance, Simon Barrett's movie. Really his directorial debut, really. So check that out. I think it's on Shudder. I think this might have been where I watched it.
Okay.
Anyways, love him. So yeah, plugs of my projects. Might as well just do that. So Spinsters of Horror. We are on all social media, so just find us through that. We do I Spit on Your Podcast, which is on all podcasting apps. Our latest episode that we released earlier this month is on The Woman, Lucky McKee, who is another fantastic, interesting filmmaker. So it's on The Woman, 2011's The Woman, deep dive into like feral feminism, misogyny, generational trauma. So it's a heavy one, but it's really fantastic. So that's our latest episode. And then Our Bloody Obsession, it's much more niche. But if you are curious about extreme cinema, or in fact are a fan of it and enjoy it, then you can find Our Bloody Obsession on all social media and on podcasting apps. It took a little bit of a break based off of just Zoe's out in the UK, so sometimes scheduling is tricky with time zones. Right. Holy moly.
Oh yeah.
But our last episode was bleak and dark, as a lot of them are. It was on Sunken Danish and Snuff 102. Oh my goodness. So if you want to ruin your day, watch those movies and check out our podcast. So that's where I'm at. And again, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. It is. If you see something again in the future that you're interested in coming on for, definitely, I'd love to have you back.
Thank you. I will.
Thanks again to Kelly for joining me. Next week, the start of Werewolf Month begins with an episode on two classics from 1981, The Howling and An American Werewolf in London. And Donna from the Dawn of the Dead podcast returns to the show to kick off this series. Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm GeekThulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by donating to the Ko-fi page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.